Primitive gameplay that is hard to enjoy.
Secure bosses with Dark Souls
Recycled
combat.
bosses, so get ready for 5 more copy-pasted
Performance
giant
issue
dragons
very
in the
bad.
first
I will
couple
flip
of-
my boat as soon as you add widescreen support.
DS3 is
This
better.
is beyond stupid. You are
No
literally
blind
blocking the view on
Since
both
the
sides.
DLC with the Day 1 patch, the performance of this great game
This
is
game
very
is freaking
bad.
impossible.
Before it
If
runs
you can
flawless
beat
on my
Bakel, you are a cheating
RTX
scumbag,
4050.
and I know what you did. The DLC is freaking trash.
DLC is too hard. Longtime Elden Ring player, but damn it's
Is
tough.
Elden Ring, Shadow of the Erdtree too hard?
Elden Ring is so huge now that Jitgud is no longer a battle cry.
Still maidenless.
Elden Ring DLC down to mixed reviews on Steam.
These Elden Ring DLC bosses are overtuned now. It's simple.
I've
First
been
you
getting
dodge
a
the
vibe
lunge,
check on
then wait a
people's
beat,
reactions
then
to
dodge
the
the
DLC,
second lunge.
and the one
floor
thing I
slam,
keep
the
seeing is
sharp
people underestimating the impact of Scattertree blessings.
Elden Ring's DLC is too hard.
How does a community that prides itself on getting good at a game turn its back completely on what they preach? How does a game that has always led players to experiment not send the message clear enough? How can every Elden Ring player learn the lesson that FromSoftware placed in the game from day one? I am proud to say that we have come full circle, and it feels like release week of base Elden Ring all over again. With the release of Elden Ring's newest expansion, Shadow of the Erdtree, it has seen a massive divide in opinions across the board, mainly on its extremely unrelenting difficulty for players ranging from newbies to Souls veterans, but also some other glaring issues that need to be addressed. It has been just over a week since its launch, and the first impressions from the community have been all over the place. Things like the DLC is too hard, the DLC is their greatest ever, this DLC doesn't adhere to the wider community, this DLC is the most accessible yet, the DLC killed my favorite weapon. It also comes with very important questions, like, does the new mainstream appeal of Elden Ring hurt it in the sense that it will lose the identity that makes the games unique? And will FromSoftware officially step in to respond to these issues and provide more balance than their sudden calibration update buffing the Scooby-Doo fragments? We look at all sides of the issue and discuss how Shadow of the Erdtree split the Souls community. I should mention that this video is going to contain gameplay, items, bosses, and story spoilers for the expansion, so if that affects you, please proceed with caution. Also, subscribe, as I want to get better and better at making these videos and complete my main quest to get to 100,000 subscribers. Subscribing and liking a video is a pure reflection on how I'm doing. So yeah, let me know if you like it, so leave a like and subscribe. Let's talk about difficulty for a moment. FromSoftware has always been notorious for creating difficult games even from their roots. While Kingsfield and Armored Core games were not intentionally meant to be hard, they still posed many challenges for players at their respective releases. It wasn't really until Hidetaka Miyazaki, the absolute GOAT at making video games, came in and decided to adopt a philosophy relating to difficulty and how overcoming great challenges rewards deep satisfaction with their players, thus pioneering the Souls genre for the wide world to experience. Why do I mention then that we've come full circle? The short answer is if you know, you know. But the thing is, the topic of difficulty always comes around in almost every new FromSoftware title. Demon's Souls gathered a lot of attention for its deviation from being a readily accessible game with proper tutorials and clear game mechanics. Largely positive, but it brought a lot of negativity for the drawbacks that came with it. Dark Souls came out and was regarded as one of the hardest games of all time, and perpetuated that belief with every subsequent entry into the series, always raising the question that's been raised to death: are these games too hard? Do they need an easy mode? And while I think a lot of the time it's brought up, I do think it's important to not devalue the opinions of casual or players that have never experienced these games before. If we look back at Demon's Souls, we can find this old article that explicitly states that summoning was a part of the game. On a personal quote from Miyazaki, he said that the origin of that idea is actually due to a personal experience, where a car suddenly stopped on a hillside after some heavy snow and started to slip. The car following me also got stuck, and then the one behind it spontaneously bumped into it and started pushing it up the hill. That's it. That's how everyone can get home. Then it was my turn, and everyone started pushing my car up the hill, and I managed to get home safely. But I couldn't stop the car to say thanks to the people who gave me a shove. I'd have just got stuck again if I'd stopped. On the way back home, I wondered whether the last person in the line had made it home, and thought I would probably never meet the people who had helped me. I thought that maybe if we'd met in another place, we'd become friends. Or maybe we'd just fight. You could probably call it a connection of mutual assistance between transient people. Oddly, that incident will probably linger in my heart for a long time, simply because it's fleeting. I think it stays with you a lot longer, like the cherry blossoms we Japanese love so much. This clearly inspired some form of summoning, spirits, any form of help in the game, and it wasn't until the convenient Bandai Namco marketing of the prepare-to-die version of Dark Souls that challenge without summons became a staple to the fandom. Hell, Miyazaki himself admitted that he uses the Mimic Tier's Spirit Ash summon, saying that, quote, "I want to preface this by saying I absolutely suck at video games, so my approach or playstyle was to use everything I have at my disposal, all the assistance, every scrap of aid the game offers, and also all the knowledge that I have as the architect of the game. The freedom and open world nature of Elden Ring perhaps lowers the barrier to entry, and I might be the one who's befitting the most from that, as a player more than anyone else. Some players may look down on others who use summons or other items that can give you helping hand against enemies. I've never felt any shame. After all, I'm trying to take down gods and demigods. Shout out to my Mimic Tier for always being by my side." Easy modes have always been a part of games, selections, and added difficulty options on menus, and they only take away from the experience that FromSoftware is trying to give, in my opinion. Plus, there are many games that offer these options, and I'm okay with just booting these games up and jumping in. It is the team's vision at FromSoftware of the experience that they created after all, and I'm personally for the way that these games function. It tries to give everyone the same experience while giving you options to use what's at your disposal. Sekiro is a great example, especially because of the gameplay change, but I also find it funny that Sekiro gives you the option of a harder difficulty, because you can just ring a giant bell to make the game harder. And I know I'm not the only one who rang this bell not knowing what I was getting into. If we take a look back at some of the bosses from every game, we can see that the community then, alongside the press, didn't deem them impossible. Manus and Artorias were basically Sekiro bosses with their hyper-aggressiveness compared to the base game of Dark Souls. Many had countless deaths from the Fume Knight in Dark Souls 2. And don't even get me started on the Nameless King, who popularized delayed attack combos for the series. Or Sister Freed, with their excruciatingly devastating multi-phase boss fight that had people fuming all over the world. Heck, Demon Souls had a boss that literally took levels from you if you got caught in a grab attack. What is fair about that? But now we reach Elden Ring, the first title with an actual easy mode, and it's just called the Mimic Tier. No, I'm just kidding. But seriously, it's the game that truly hit mainstream audiences the best, and is genuinely their most accessible and beginner-friendly title to date. It is absolutely still difficult. I don't have videos on the game's bosses for no reason, but with additions more like tutorials, the freedom of exploration if you get stuck, spirit ashes, and more, it can now be more comfortably played by a wider group of people. And this fact was definitely not put under the radar. The main lesson Elden Ring teaches every player is to test a boss, then get your ass kicked, then go explore, then come back with the new weapons, knowledge, and levels to beat them. It's always a satisfying payoff, and Spirit Ashes are a huge portion of the game for a reason too. Personally, I prefer the Dark Souls style of play, where it's me against a boss, and I have to beat it to advance. But that is my choice, and Elden Ring is a game full of choices, builds, exploring. It's all a part of your story and what makes it so special. So what made Shadows of the Erdtree different? It's easy to say that the scaling of the enemies is a huge issue, and maybe the reliance on the new Shadow Tree fragments is an even bigger issue, but I think it's just a good idea to show you people reacting to things that you definitely struggled on.
I mean, silly. Silly! You're repeating! There!
That just insta kills me.
What the
Oh, double balls! Ah!
No. Wow. I can't even see what's happening there.
Oh, cool! That's epic.
Uh-oh.
Oh yeah, the stab attack. Always watch out for... Bro, how many attacks can you do in a row?
3. Oh.
Hit him with one of these. Oh my god.
Many people deem these new bosses straight up impossible to beat, whether it was the Divine Lion's lightning phase or Relana's non-stop Tekken attacks. It really put people on the verge of tears with how long it took some of them. A lot of the time, it was so difficult to find windows to punish when it felt like all they did was attack. And if you wanted to just tank it, say goodbye to your health. Let me also put it this way. Kai Cenat started his Elden Ring journey almost a month ago, and most definitely improved by the time the DLC rolled around. I won't show it here, but it took him almost 30 hours to get to the final boss, which based off of reviews and playtime, seemed pretty standard for the DLC. But it took him another 60 to actually beat it without using summons or spirit ashes. This even got him to get a therapist to console him on stream. Despite this insane time sink, Kai still holds strong on this opinion on the game.
And I'm getting through these bro. It's a skill issue. I'm in your ass. But your though. Cause you really like say it is too hard. Put your big boy pants on, go out there, and go fight.
And this whole debate even sparked a famous Moist Critical rant on the whole too hard discussion. It must also be made clear that the expansion isn't just throwing these stupid scalar numbers on enemies and bosses for the sake of making it difficult, and are still in fact adhering to their improvement on accessibility with Shadow Tree fragments and revered Spirit Ash blessings. A lot of people are torn on it because some believe that even with the feature, the bosses still pose an extreme threat, while many say that the people complaining are probably not taking full advantage of it. Even the official Bandai Namco and Elden Ring Steam pages made sure to tell the whole world of its existence and how it works, because it may have either gone over a lot of the player base's heads or it was just pretty miscommunicated to everyone. On a personal anecdote, I have friends who don't read any items or use any sort of builds when fighting. They just bash their heads against bosses until something works. And while that's fine and all, I can't give into credibility of complaints that a boss is too hard if you didn't take the time to read something that is in your face and made clear on how it works. Shadow Tree fragments literally turn your stats yellow. They have that much focus on them. A lot of people went into the DLC thinking that over-leveling would make bosses much easier, just like the base game, when really it's these fragments that make all the difference. This can be seen as a two-sided coin though, since the Shadow Tree fragments make that much of a difference. But I do think this was one of the only ways FromSoft could have balanced the DLC for everyone. I think a lot of new bosses being difficult was just the developers expecting everyone to fully interact and explore the open world, consistently obtaining these new power-ups, alongside actively attempting the fights they were stuck on in order to learn the boss. The lesson you were supposed to learn in the main game about exploration is the lesson you will have to learn in the DLC. Now, some would argue that the balancing truly was extremely wacky, and FromSoftware did just release a patch buffing the early game stats of Shadow Tree fragments in order to help people beat the first couple of bosses. So there is a level of truth if this many people were that angry about it. They wouldn't buff the Shadow Tree blessing for players if they didn't actually agree in some way. But could it be the result of a severe influx of negative reviews that forced them to make a switch? It's really hard to say, but I think it could go either way. All in all, it is difficult to quantify just exactly what's making everyone who is reporting these issues actually feel like this new expansion is impossible. because it could honestly be anything. Bushy, an extremely great player at the game, had this to say on the issues. It's been just under a week since Shadow of the Erdtree launched, and now we're seeing full new FromSoft game release cycle. It starts with the game is too hard because no one knows what the powerful weapon or strats are. Now it's shifted into creators one-shotting bosses with perfumes in Bloodfiend's arm, demonstrating that the DLC is not significantly harder than any of the FromSoftware releases. And that's not to say that the DLC is easy, it's to say that all of these games are meant to be difficult, and it's easy to forget that when you've had the opportunity to play and practice the same bosses for over 2 years. I imagine there will be a revisionist narrative that the DLC was too hard until the patch, but in reality, these games are more difficult when you know less about them. With a small amount of time and learning, the challenges that were previously considered insurmountable become very possible. One thing I do notice in Elden Ring bosses is that the scripted attacks follow up with another or not, depending on distance from the boss, and if you're going for another attack, which can make them feel more alive, but at the cost of consistency. That's just a personal note there. Overall, it's not the first time a DLC and/or game has had the issues that are being generally reported, but I do wonder if, apart from this calibration update that was put out, if FromSoftware is going to fold on rebalancing the current state of the game. This is the part of the split that I feel like isn't being touched on by almost anyone, and I feel like I should talk about it. Performance. The other main part of the criticism Shadow of the Erdtree garnered was getting the general performance across people's machines. Even some extremely tanky builds were finding it very tough to run even when not a lot was happening in-game, and that includes tuning down the graphical settings to low. With how some of the bosses were spouting particles and magic, and this and that every single attack, forget it. It would just add on to the struggles people were facing. Consoles were no exception to this as well, and reviewers such as IGN made it clear that it dropped off for them since the newest update. Base Elden Ring had a few issues regarding performance too, and it may or may not still be in the game, but sometimes just stuttering around areas for quite literally no reason, especially the first Tree Sentinel fight, and some places in Altus Plateau, unfortunately don't take the cake compared to some of the graphical issues that we're running into in the Shadow of the Erdtree. I want to stress that Elden Ring is an absolutely gorgeous game with both a unique and fantastic art direction that separates it from so many other titles and is genuinely just a marvel to look at. It's just straight up unfortunate that this fact is bogged down by these issues. I really do think that despite making their best game yet with so many masterpieces that preceded Elden Ring, FromSoftware unfortunately just does and should not get a pass in this department, and they most certainly need to address this across the board, as this is another part of the accessibility spectrum that hurts the general player base. I really do wish that they had reached some better technological advances with how they handle these graphics in the expansion, but I guess for now, we just have to wait. All of the criticism regarding performance is entirely valid, and something needs to be done about it. If you played Elden Ring on launch, then you remember that Pot Friend wasn't a proper quest in the base game. And you remember how many quests and dialogue were either placed in after patch or removed entirely before the game came out. I made a video on the original Frenzied Flame quest with Kale and his brothers, and this insane tragic dialogue.
Did you see what they did to my ancestors? The whole clan buried alive, sick, maddened, husks of themselves.
This was cut, and Alexander was added. But the main thing to both of these was that if they both didn't exist, there would be a small lack of substance. I found people discussing that the DLC had some large areas with almost nothing to do, and I have to agree. Unless there is some secret other than parrying the lantern enemy in the woods, I found that there was no reason for this section to be this long without being able to ride Torrent. I love this area, but another dungeon or a couple of mini-bosses, hell, a quest with an NPC, could have helped a lot here, since it's just an empty space until Midra's Manse. The same goes for those large finger areas on the map. There is so much space that these take up on the map, but almost no real reason to be here outside of sounding the horn for the finger quest. And again, I know this DLC is gigantic and it's one of the best ever made, but I just feel that there's inconsistencies here that shouldn't be discounted. I can still love the DLC and feel this way. You can too. I promise you, it's gonna be okay. I would almost expect FromSoftware to add either another quest or something small to these sections in the future, like they added PvP to the Colosseum areas, but this part of the criticism is one that I see slip under the radar. I genuinely believe that Elden Ring reaching a much more mainstream appeal is the biggest blessing possible for FromSoftware, but I do think that the question of a wider audience tarnishes a game's identity is something that should be addressed overall. Arrowhead director Pillisted, the guy working on Helldivers 2, said, "A game that is for everyone is a game for no one," in regards to the controversies surrounding Shadows of the Erdtree. And I really don't think there is a better game to apply it to than Elden Ring. Miyazaki himself has even admitted something akin to this, and the last thing I would ever want for these games is for it to turn into something not in FromSoftware's creative vision. Of course, opinions and criticism should never be ignored, but to what lengths does FromSoftware listen? The Soulsborne games have always asked a lot more out of the player than most other titles, and it seems that people are easily forgetting just how difficult they are all meant to be. If they just spoon-fed victories to the players, of what worth is the victory? I want to encourage you all to leave some constructive criticism on the matter in the comments down below, and tell me what you really think of this controversy. I love Elden Ring, and I really think Shadow of the Erdtree hit the nail on the head. It is one of the best DLCs ever made, and it is a solid 10 out of 10 for me. And I am excited to keep talking about it. My name is Evan, and hopefully I just explained that really well. I'll catch you in the next video.